Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 27th of August. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. I'm Mark Broome, and thanks for joining us on this beautiful late summer's day here in Seoul. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. A U.S. report says North Korea is in the process of building a submarine capable of launching ballistic missiles. If confirmed, it would mean the North could potentially launch a submarine-based missile attack on Alaska and U.S. bases in Asia. Consumer sentiment in South Korea improves in August following the government's stimulus measures and the central bank's interest rate cut. Plus, Israel and Hamas both accept a plan put forward by Egypt for a long-term ceasefire in Gaza, ending 7 weeks of fighting that has left more than 2,000 people dead. Our top story this morning, U.S. intelligence agencies have grave suspicions North Korea is building a submarine capable of launching ballistic missiles. The development raises fresh concerns about the missile and nuclear threat posed by the regime. Shin Se-min has this report.
You're looking at North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sitting atop of a Romeo-class submarine. The photos of Kim surfaced in June when he visited a naval unit of the Korean People's Army and, according to North Korean state media, conducted a drill and instructed the captain on navigation methods. His visit is part of North Korea's efforts to shore up the underwater operation capability of its submarines. And it seems the North is making inroads. U.S.-based media outlet Washington Free Beacon reports that U.S. defense intelligence agencies recently detected a previously unseen missile launch tube on a North Korean submarine. North Korea is reportedly developing a ballistic missile submarine that, if confirmed to be true, would significantly raise the threat posed by the nuclear-armed communist state. According to the report, U.S. intelligence shows Pyongyang is developing a submarine capable of launching ballistic missiles. North Korea is also believed to have already obtained submarine-launched ballistic missiles from Russia. Pentagon spokesman Jeffrey Poole refused to comment on the report, saying he was not allowed to discuss matters of national intelligence. However, he did say the U.S. urges Pyongyang to be more transparent with its defense activities for the sake of regional peace. If the report is true and Pyongyang has developed its capability, the U.S. will have to look into strengthening its missile defense systems on the West Coast, as North Korea would be capable of hitting Alaska. U.S. bases in Japan, the Philippines, and Guam would also be well within range of a North Korean strike launch from waters in Asia. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, relations between the two Koreas are not at a very high point, really, in recent weeks, mainly because of South Korea's joint military drills with the U.S. But there is one area where the two Koreas are seeing eye to eye and cooperating. That is the Asian Games, set to take place from next month in South Korea's port city of Incheon. North Korea has said it would send a 273-member delegation to this very prestigious sporting event. And on Tuesday, the two Koreas started discussing related matters. South Korea's Unification Ministry says it sent a 2-page letter to North Korea through the truce village of Panmunjom. A ministry official says the letter did not contain a direct offer to provide financial support for the North Korean athletes as the North wants, but added that Seoul will give its full support in making sure the North Korean athletes don't experience any major inconveniences during their time here. Turning now to the National Assembly, and deadlock there, unfortunately, is nothing new these days, especially when it comes to the special Seoul-Ho ferry sinking bill that's at the core of most of the drama. But emotions intensified even further on Tuesday, with opposition lawmakers launching a sit-in protest, boycotting all legislation until the bereaved families get more of a say regarding the probe into the sinking. Our Connie Kim has this report.
Opposition lawmakers have occupied the National Assembly building, blocking all parliamentary proceedings to press their demand that the ruling party let the victims' families take part in setting up an investigation into the ferry sinking. Following the ruling party's rejection one day earlier to hold three-way talks with the families, Lawmakers of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy earlier on Tuesday demonstrated outside the presidential office of Cheongwade, asking President Park Geun-hye to help resolve the deadlock. They joined dozens of members of bereaved families who have been camped out there since Friday.
We will fight against the ruling Saenuri party and the president until they respond to the requests of the victims' families who want to uncover the real causes of the sinking.
The protesters are calling on the ruling party to make yet another concession after the families rejected bipartisan compromise deals twice on the grounds that their voices were not fully reflected in how a probe into the accident will be carried out. The ruling party lashed back at the opposition party, accusing them of abandoning democratic principles and urging them to immediately return to the National Assembly. The Saenuri party said they will not agree on tripartite negotiations, but will seek to talk to the victims' relatives separately. The months-long political deadlock has suspended all legislative proceedings, including bills aimed at revitalizing the economy and ending corruption, as well as an annual parliamentary audit that was scheduled for this Tuesday. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, the government wants to give startups and small to mid-sized firms better access to funds, which have been crying out for. They expect to do this by easing the government's grip over financial institutions. Our Chae Sun has the details on a deal that was reached on Tuesday between banks and the government.
As of June of this year, 73% of corporate loans were made to small and mid-sized businesses, a 10 percentage point drop from the end of 2009. The financial sector, specifically those employed by financial institutions, are often reluctant to take a risk with startups and SMEs as they face sanctions if the borrower becomes insolvent. Reporting to President Park Geun-hye at our Economic Advisors meeting Tuesday, the state-run Financial Services Commission said it would lift more than 90% of such sanctions. That means, in the case of insolvency, employees will not be deprived of a promotion or bonuses so long as there are no procedural failures. The financial regulator will instead strengthen sanctions on the institutions. To further encourage financial support for the president's envisioned creative economy, which aims to converge ICT, culture, and other areas, the FSC talked about offering incentives to banks that support innovation and technology-based firms. The government also plans to set up a technology-valued investment fund totaling $295 million that will be used as venture capital and more than double another fund that buys a tech firm's intellectual property or shares to guarantee a return on its investments. President Park urged authorities to ensure enough low-interest loans are made available for businesses whose creativity and innovative technology are appreciated. Many financial insiders welcomed the government's sanction reforms, but there were some concerned about how assessing the bank's innovation for incentives could limit their autonomy and push them toward insolvency. Chae Sun, Arirang News.
Now, the government's efforts to shore up economic sentiment and the central bank's recent rate cut, this month in fact, are beginning to bear fruit, it seems, because the Bank of Korea says the Consumer Sentiment Index stood at 107 in August. That's up 2 points from a month earlier. The figure marks a rebound from July, suggesting Korean consumers might be returning to their old spending habits, which were dented severely after April's Seoul ferry disaster. The index hovered at around the 108 level in the first 4 months of this year, but dropped to 105 in May following the disaster which occurred in mid-April. A reading over 100 means optimists outnumber pessimists. Now, birth rates have been falling in nearly every developed country in the world for years now, but even against this backdrop, Korea stands out, and not in a good way. And the problem is actually getting worse by the year. If the trend continues, officials say Korea's super low birth rate will inevitably impact the labour force and therefore severely limit room for economic growth. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
It's becoming harder to hear the crying of newborns in Korea. The nation's birth rate has been on a steady decline over the past 40 years. Currently, it has the lowest birth rate among the 34 OECD member countries. Last year, the number of newborns stood at 436,500, a near 10% decrease from 2012. This means about 8.6 babies were born among a population of 1,000, the lowest since the year 1970, when the government first began recording population data. The age of pregnant mothers, meanwhile, is getting higher, which is one of the main contributing factors for the country's low birth numbers. Last year, the average age of mothers who gave birth was 31.8 years old, 0.2 year older than the previous year. 1 in 5 of them were aged 35 or older. The Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs says the low birth rate trend will affect the labor force in the long run. The number of able workers between the ages of 15 to 64 is estimated to stand at 37.2 million in 2016 and is expected to steadily decrease to less than 9.5 million people by the year 2100.
The country's labor productivity will greatly fall with the growing rise of the aging labor population as there are less newcomers joining the workforce.
The researcher emphasized the need to come up with comprehensive measures to ease the burdens families face when raising children, particularly policies that would help parents balance work and family life. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Hello, Mark.
A new ceasefire has been reached between Israel and Hamas, and this time it says at least it doesn't have an expiration date.
Right. Could this be the beginning of the end? The long-term truce was announced Tuesday and went into effect starting 7 p.m. local time. Joyful Palestinians poured into the streets to celebrate the news of the ceasefire that appeared to put a cap on the 7 weeks of heavy fighting that has killed more than 2,200 people and left tens of thousands others homeless, most of them in Gaza. Egypt, which brokered the deal, said the contents of the ceasefire included an easing of the Gaza blockade, opening border crossings for aid and reconstruction materials to pass through, and extending the fishing limit to 6 nautical miles from 3 nautical miles. Both sides have agreed to return to Cairo for talks to address the tough issues sometime within the next month, according to the Associated Press. Sources say the United States has begun reconnaissance flights over Syria following President Barack Obama's green light on Tuesday. This as the White House is mulling over extending airstrikes to Syria after seeing considerable success in neighboring Iraq in holding back Islamic State militants warring for territory against Kurdish Peshmerga forces. Now, the surveillance flights are seen as a mission to obtain additional information as Pentagon officials draft potential options for the president, including airstrikes. Syria, though, has warned Washington not to extend its airstrikes over its airspace if it will be unilateral in nature, underlining that they must be planned in tandem with Damascus. A United Nations helicopter has been shot down in rural South Sudan, killing 3 people on board. The UN says they were Russian citizens who died, while 1 person on board did survive. The cargo chopper crashed near Bentiu, a hotly contested region between government and rebel fighters who have been engaged in fighting since December. A spokesman for a state governor said a rebel commander had warned the UN not to fly over that territory last week. The United Nations said it is investigating the crash. And Korea's foreign ministry has issued a special travel warning to Congo after the Central African state confirmed deaths from the Ebola virus. The warning applies to only the northern province of Equateur for an initial period of 1 week, which will be automatically extended until a cancellation notice is issued. Meanwhile, in England, the first Briton to contract Ebola in decades, William Pooley, has received the experimental drug ZMapp, according to reports. The volunteer nurse had become infected while working with patients in Sierra Leone, and the WHO is saying that more than 240 healthcare workers in West Africa have fallen sick to the virus, with about half of them dying from Ebola.
Said that a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. Arirang News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. Japan will use some government funds to promote the verification result of its landmark apology to the victims of its wartime system of sex slavery. According to Japan's national broadcaster NHK, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said on Tuesday that Tokyo will spend part of its budget to advertise the Kono statement, both at home and abroad, following a request by the government. The Kono statement was Tokyo's acknowledgement in 1993 of the Japanese military's involvement in forcing tens of thousands of women, including a great many Koreans, into sexual servitude before and during World War II. Critics said Japan's review of the Kono statement earlier this year suggested the Abe administration wanted to make it look as though the admittance was based on shaky evidence, so as to damage the credibility of the apology and lessen its international reputation. Now, the latest discovery of nearly 80 Buddhist artifacts on the outskirts of Seoul pardon me, was unveiled to the public last week. They are among some of the finest preserved and historically important pieces related to Northeast Asian Buddhism. Our Song Ji-son reports.
At the entrance of a trail leading to summit of Dobongsan Mountain in northern Seoul sits Dobong-Sewon. During Korea's Joseon dynasty, which spanned more than 500 years until the late 19th century, Dobong-Sewon acted as an institute for educating young scholars and remembering historic ones. This particular institute was dedicated to Jo Gwang-jo, a Confucian scholar who pursued radical reforms in the early 16th century. But recent discoveries at the site have people, historians in particular, looking even further back to the Goryeo dynasty, which ruled most of the Korean peninsula between the 10th and 14th century. A total of 77 Buddhist artifacts from the Goryeo era have been discovered here at Dobong-Sewon, a site that functioned as a Confucian academy during the Joseon dynasty. The site, currently being restored, is set to be reopened next year. Among the dozens of artifacts excavated, one very sophisticated piece that's unique to the Goryeo era stands out. It's this Kumgangnyeong, a bell used in Buddhist ceremonies during prayer chants. It's the first known piece in which the 4 heavenly guardians and the 5 great kings are engraved on one instrument, a first not just in Korea, but in other Northeast Asian countries where Buddhism has roots. Although these artifacts were found at an institute that was used during the Joseon dynasty, at a time when Buddhism was suppressed to foster Confucianism, they were not hidden or destroyed.
Before transforming into an institute, the site was used as a temple in the Goryeo era. It is assumed that these artifacts were buried as part of a ceremony to pay respect to the Buddha. These were found inside these larger pots, which helped to preserve their original shapes and materials relatively well.
The preliminary report on these artifacts will now be handed over to art historians, who will conduct further studies and look for clues about Buddhist practices during the Goryeo era. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
Now, in Korea's corporate culture, employees take orders and generally refrain from questioning their seniors or expressing bold new ideas. But an increasing number of local IT companies are breaking the status quo. in an effort to survive in the global marketplace. Our Yulian has this report.
Korean IT companies are creating a more casual work environment to promote creativity. Daum Communications, which is set to merge with Korea's largest messenger application company, Kakao Corporation, says it will have its 1,600 workers refer to each other with English names by October. It's intended to eliminate the hierarchy that's standard in Korean culture, where employees are socially obligated to address each other by their position and seniority instead of by their first names like in the West. Daum believes the change will allow young staffers to more freely express themselves and enhance communication and cooperation in the process. Naver Corporation took a step in the same direction recently when it said that its employees will stop referring to each other by their titles to create a less formal work environment. Could the seemingly minor changes bring about real changes to Korea's innovation potential? A recent innovation index ranked Korea 16th out of 77 countries, higher than Japan or China. But when it came to the so-called tolerance index, which measures how much a society tolerates different values and thoughts, Korea was ranked near the bottom at 62.
If we look at our Confucianist culture, we were taught that there is a right answer to everything. We're never taught to look for new answers. To foster creativity, we need to learn that there isn't just one correct answer to everything, and understand there could be multiple answers.
With Korea's rigid and hierarchical corporate culture being blamed for stifling creativity, the IT companies are trying to break it down, one English name at a time. Yurian, Arirang News.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the South Korean Little League World Series team as they received a congratulatory message from President Park Geun-hye herself. Now, the South Korean Little League team, who said they wanted to meet President Park Geun-hye after their Little League World Series victory, got a personal message from the president. Now, she stated that the entire nation is proud of their feat and that their victory meant that much more since it was their first in 29 years. Now, she added that she hopes to see the team grow and continue their success. Meanwhile, staying in baseball, some bad news for Chu Shin-soo of the Texas Rangers as his season came to an end after his team decided to perform surgery on his elbow. The South Korean slugger, who signed a 7-year, $130 million deal during the past offseason, will get surgery on his left elbow in 2 weeks. The bone spur, which has been bothering him throughout the season, was known by the team during spring training as the team decided on the surgery, with the team nowhere near playoff contention. Meanwhile, he's set to rehab for 8 weeks after the surgery. Meanwhile, more injury news for another big-name star, this time in the UFC, where the Korean zombie Chung Chang-sung will miss his fight slated for October after injuring his shoulder during training. Now, the 27-year-old fighter, who's currently ranked 6th in the featherweight class, injured the same shoulder he has been rehabbing since his title fight against Jose Aldo 1 year ago. His managers stated that the rehab will take about a month as he plans to finally return to the UFC in December. And now finishing things off with some Tuesday night KBO action, we had the two Seoul games rain out last night as the Kia Tigers and the Nexen Heroes were rained out, as well as the Tucson Bears and the LG Twins. But the Samsung Lions were able to cruise past the Lotte Giants 10-7. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Hanwha Eagles take on the NC Dinos. And of course, going into the game here, first inning, Eric Thames with an RBI double to left field scores Park Min-woo, and the NC Dinos take the lead 1-0. By the bottom of the inning, with man on second, Song Kwang-min an RBI single to right, and we're tied 1-1. Bottom of the fourth, two-man on, Song Kwang-min once again, this one a two-run single to left, and the Hanwha Eagles take the lead 3-1. Ninth inning, NC down 3-2 with the bases loaded and 2 outs, but Lee Sang-ho at bat, and here it goes. He strikes out, looking ball game over. The Hanwha Eagles win this one 3-2. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Passing showers are in store for the southern regions in the morning hours, and 10 to 60 millimeters of showers are in store for Jeollado province and Jeju Island during the day, and that rain could be accompanied by thunder and lightning, while the rest of the regions could see mix of sun and clouds, including here in Seoul. And depends on where you are, you could have hotter, cooler, or similar to yesterday's daytime high. So let's take a closer look at those temperatures. The high in the capital will rise to 30, while Daegu and Gwangju will make it to 28, and Busan will hike up to 26 later on. And for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 26 and 28 respectively, and Dokdo should see highs of 22 later in the day. Now, please be aware of a big temperature difference, as overnight lows in the capital are dropping into the low 20s, but the daytime highs will rebound into the 30s, and it seems like this late summer-like weather pattern will persist for a while. Well, that's all I have for you at this hour, and let's send it back to Mark in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, there, and for the advice about the colds as well. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. For more of the latest stories, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news. Do enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Goodbye.